Hola, Juan David. ¿Me escuchas?
¿Qué Pat? Pero no te veo la...
Aquí estoy. ¿Qué tal?
Ahora sí, hermano.
Estamos esperando a Grady a que venga. Estamos en vivo en Facebook, perdón, en YouTube.
Pero no te veo... Oh, en YouTube, ok, no en Facebook, ok.
Estamos esperando a Grady a que venga. Estamos en vivo
Ah, está haciendo eco, ¿ah?
en YouTube. Dame un segundito porque tengo un audio que no...
Tranquilo. Está haciendo eco, ¿ah?
Sí. Ok, ahí está. ¿Me escuchas?
Sí, compadre, sí, te
A
escucho.
ver, entonces Grady, todavía no estamos grabando, estamos en vivo, pero no se está grabando, así que...
Vamos a hacerla en inglés, ¿no?
¿Cómo la recibiste tú? ¿Cómo recibiste la invitación?
¿La invitación?
Sí, de Zoom.
Por email. Eh, sí, por email, ¿no? No
Ah,
entiendo. Sí, sí, por email. ¿Por qué? ¿Cómo así?
porque Grady no la ha recibido todavía, entonces
Y es que tú...
déjame ver si...
mira, tú me la mandaste a un email que tenía hace 20 años, bueno.
Ah, ok.
Pero me
Entonces,
diste
déjame,
otro.
se la envío otra vez para que la tenga él y empezamos.
Sí,
Right?
mándale una. No, sí, no sé.
To
Sí, me avisas. ¿Quieres?
Graydon Train.
Sí, pero ya, sí, ya se la mandaste, ¿no? ¿No tiene otro email?
Grady Train, ok. Listo.
A mí se me olvidaba que tú tenías arete, güey.
Grady.
Como Shakespeare.
Ok.
Está.
Vamos a hacerlo en inglés, ¿no? Así que
Sure, man.
voy a empezar a grabarla y también hay que compartir esta charla en Facebook, así que
Ok. Esta me decía, pero es para él y sí, eso es parte de tu clases o algo.
es parte de una serie de conversaciones que estamos haciendo sobre literatura y
Chévere.
me encantaría compartirlo con la gente en Facebook, así que déjame ver si se puede aquí.
Buenísimo. Ya estás en live, ¿no? Ya estás live
Estoy en
en
live, estamos en live en YouTube. Ahí está.
allá
Ahora
en el
sí.
fondo.
Ahora sí estamos en vivo.
Allá en el reflejo de tu pantalla veo a tu chica.
Ah, sí. Bueno.
Bueno, no se ve mucho, no se ve así.
Bueno, ya está ahí en Facebook y vamos a ponerlo también en la página nuestra para que todo el mundo la tenga ahí. Post. Ok, ahora sí.
Okay.
Oye, Grady, no sé, está perdido en...
Grady, no sé. Grady siempre un misterio.
Sí. Record. Vamos a empezar a grabar en
Algo a revisar.
la nube.
Ah,
Déjame lo llamo a ver qué dice.
vale, tranquilo.
Grady.
Ok, ya vi que pusiste un link.
Qué raro.
Grady siempre un misterio.
Si no, bueno. Record. Vamos a empezar a grabar en
Algo a revisar.
la nube. Déjame lo llamo a ver qué dice.
Ok. Está rejuvenecido, loco. ¿Ah?
Todos los filtros que tengo ahí. Qué raro que no conteste este Grady.
No sé.
We're live. Déjame le mando el número de
Dale, tranquilo.
meeting.
Yo aprovecho para ir al baño.
Ok.
Sí. Ya no te veo.
Sí, aquí estoy, pero tratando de que encontrar a Grady. Si no, vamos a tener que empezar, pero
¿Cómo?
ojalá que no le hayan enviado unas 5 pepitas de... Mentira.
Se las mandó el Orange.
Exacto. Bueno, vamos. Aquí está. Mira, aquí está.
Hello, Grady. How are you, sir?
Hi, Grady. How are you?
He's still connecting.
Hello.
Can you hear
Hello.
us?
Hello, West Hollywood. Hello, New York. Hello, me.
So we are live on Facebook right now, I think. Let me check our YouTube also. I think just going to check really quickly. Yes, we are live.
How are you, sir?
Hi, Grady. How are you?
He's still connecting.
I'm just fine. I was wondering if I'd ask Juan David, what's my eye line?
What's your eye line?
Yes, I feel it's slightly split at this point. And
You look good. Yeah, no.
there's that. Hello, Americans.
Hi, everyone. Well, we started a little later than we thought, but here we are. First of all, I want to welcome our friend and literature lover, comrade in arms, Juan David Castilla. He's going to be join us from now on as a commentator, and critical eye to look at the different works of literature that we're going to be talking about. So,
Thank
Juan
you
David Castilla is a
inviting me.
Juan David brings
filmmaker,
he brings something.
Screenwriter, writer, lover of classical languages, athlete, and overall badass. So welcome.
Hey, thanks.
We're very glad to have you.
Take it. And I must welcome Juan David, especially because he brings that special eye. I think it's the filmic eye, and to bring to bear on a work of it's a true living classic, Conan Doyle and Sherlock Holmes. It's a living.
I think we chose the right author to begin with.
Yeah.
Because we've all read him prior. We've all read him before, and so we've actually all read not only his work but other novels, not only his stories but novels as well. And Juan happened to have read 5 Orange Pips, which is the story that we're going to be talking about by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle.
Correct. Yeah.
It's the one we've chosen. It's in the same volume as the one we did last week, Man with the Twisted Mouth.
Exactly.
And this one stands out because of I will say, its ties to the United States.
I think so.
This speaks to the internationalization of Conan Doyle,
right?
Because it's laced with American cities and their connection also with a very surprising and unfortunate movement that is pivotal to the denouement of this story.
Right. And I think, it also speaks about our own taste, because the first story that we chose was about a man, the man with the twisted lip. What interested us about that story, among other things, was the fact that it gave a description of London and this opiate house, right? Opium house.
Yeah, a rather sordid place.
Right, this drug place, and now there's a description of the KKK,
right,
from late 19th century London. So it speaks to Sherlock or Sir Arthur Conan Doyle interests, but also to our own interests.
Right.
Like seeing contemporary stuff and how he saw it in the 19th century.
Yeah, and it's interesting, a part of having in mind the seriousness and how severe is the case, with this story of, having the KKK. But we can see here somehow his fascination with America, with the US, how you see this contrast of how he describes Florida, sunny, warm, and nice, and in contrast you have London, gray, rainy, you know, and it's quite of, and as we will later, you know, hopefully discuss, part of the suspense and the intrigue is why this character we'll discuss chose to leave America as America, it was so great to live, you know. Instead,
he made a lot of money, right?
Yeah, and
In the
instead
United
he
States.
went back to London. You know, why would he do that? You know, so yeah. Anyway, so
Maybe a clue. There may be a clue in the story because
right, yeah. So
date of the return of Elliot
exactly.
coincides with, I believe, 1869, and that's when the KKK was not for all time. Actually, in the post-Reconstruction, it kind of fizzled. It fizzled around
Back.
9,
Right.
Yeah.
and
You know,
But it's also a good story, you know, like it's like that historical thing with the KKK, and he weaves it so well into the narrative of the story, you know.
yeah.
Why don't we walk so again, we're talking about 5 Orange Pips by Arthur Conan Doyle, a Sherlock Holmes story, a classic that we decided to bring up for our literature discussions. And let's walk our listeners and ourselves so we can get a full grasp of the story. How does it work? So, okay, so he starts by, like, the narrator of the story is Dr. Watson, as always, right? We love his voice. I love his voice. It's like so even and friendly and warm.
Right.
he
He's so
generally,
admiring of Sherlock Holmes. Go ahead.
generally lures us into us with that. It's not a narratively arresting opening.
The
But
first 2 paragraphs are kind of almost dull, right?
yeah,
But you know, yeah, but you know what I like about these first 2 paragraphs is how he sparks this interest. You know, he says, you know, I've checked all these cases from 1882 to 1890, and this case is just amazing. You know, he doesn't only says one, but he says it again or twice, like 3 times. But you know, this case was so interesting, so fascinating, and there's so many details that I'm still trying to go through my mind. You know, so it creates, like, you know, it's like when somebody tells you, "Oh, I gotta tell you something," but they don't tell you yet.
And he
right?
walks us through the previous cases, right?
Right.
Like,
And
some of the cases you guys already know because you've already seen it in the news. You've seen them in the newspaper.
in the news.
Others are incomplete, so therefore I'm not going to tell you. But this one really stands out. So
Yeah, you know, and I would like to quote where he says, "So remarkable in its details and so startling in its results, I am tempted to give some account of it in spite of the fact," you know, and he goes on. So, I should I tell you or not? You know, okay, all right, I'll tell you. You know, and you're like, God damn it, okay, tell me now. I'm
and he
hooked,
does
you know?
that for 2 paragraphs.
Right.
You know,
Yeah,
usually it's like 1 paragraph when he kind of builds it up, but he does it for 2 paragraphs, which I find really interesting.
Mhm.
It is only in the 3rd paragraph that he really jumps into the story with the description of the wind and the weather. That's when it really gets going, you know.
that's when if we were looking at a more modern tale, that might be the beginning with some rigorous edit. And in the end, it takes off from there like a racehorse. And what is left out probably is as much important to what's been left in for it's really an astonishing feat, the story.
It's such a tight story with the beginning where he describes the weather, you know, and it's like somebody knocks at the, first of all, Watson and Sherlock Holmes are hanging out together, right? Former roommates, and the weather is terrible. I don't know where Dr. Watson's wife is, but she's not home, right?
Yes. Vacation.
Right. And then somebody knocks on the door, and Watson says it must be something really serious.
Really, yeah, it has to be. You know, and one thing before coming to the knock for the door, you know, I'm here in New York. It's cold as hell. sometimes rains. You know how it's New York. It's like very similar somehow to London in many instances. And the way he describes how it's these strong winds and rain. How the rain is hitting all the windows. But then the way he describes the mood. Is so, like you said, so welcoming and so well described, because I was here, and when I reread it, I was next to the heater. I'm cold, and I'm there with them. When they talk about the fire and how it's warm. You have Holmes. He's like smoking on his his pipe, and it's so warm, so welcoming. How and really just the way he describes it, it made me feel like I wanted to be there next to the chimney with Sherlock, just hanging out, and
And definitely not outside, right?
Right, yeah.
So
anyway, yeah.
Yeah, that's and the language he uses is so poetic too.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Yeah, it's I love how he says here, as evening drew in, the storm grew higher and louder, and the wind cried and sobbed like a child in the chimney. I like that. I don't know, just little small detail. So
we were talking about it last week when this is the late 19th century, and the descriptions feel so modern in some ways. So like it's like Victorian almost, but in some ways it's the city. It's like we recognize this London.
In a way, it's because I think it's so distilled. It's so close to the action of the story, and always the characters. The characters so drawn with very careful details, and that I think we're highly focused. I mean, if we were thinking in cinematic terms, you're very close. You're very close to all these individuals, and
screenplay. I mean, it's so detailed. Yeah.
Let's start. I think it'd be really interesting. Let's talk about the young man who comes in. That's the
young Openshaw, right?
Right.
That's it.
Yeah.
Think of how he's introduced, and he's not quite what we expect, and what
right.
happened in the course of the story is definitely what we don't expect in his
case. So unexpected. You're right about that on so many levels, because it's really kind of one of the darker stories, right? And it's kind of like a failure, actually. And we can talk a lot about it, right?
It is. I will just say there's a real twinge.
By the way, I'm showing the story now.
Oh, nice. Yeah. And like if you go to when he describes the man, as you show there, what is fascinating is that you could see there Watson has learned from Sherlock about analyzing, about his analytical skills. So now the way he describes it, it's in a way as he was thinking like, okay, because always Watson, he's always trying to be as close as smart as Sherlock, which he will never will be, but this is him trying to be as Sherlockian as possible, so it's a great way of showing the character of Watson,
such a focus of fashion, right? Like well-groomed, trimply clad, some refinement and delicacy in his bearing. Like he places him in terms of class also right away, social class, right? And he wears a pince nez, which I think that's like the I don't know what that would be the equivalent of nowadays, like thick framed glasses or something.
Like an eyeglass with the nose piece,
right?
The ones just for the opera.
Like it's such a touch of refinement,
Right? Yeah. I mean, look at the symbol of the Monopoly game. You have the guy with the hat, and then he has the, you know, the pince nez, you know.
And it's a French name too, so like it's a little bit of a, it's a nice touch.
It's even
Right.
a linguistic diversion. Pince-nez.
Pince-nez. There you go.
I wanted the concision of the description in Toto is it's very police-like, you know. It's poetic in all it includes, but also very much succinct and containing all the details. If we had this description, we might be able to identify him in a crowded airport.
Mm.
So
Yeah, it's a description that a cop will give, you know, like, you know, it's just the details that you need to create the character and like Grady said, like identify him, you know.
Right. And there's some stuff that we might not even know. Like, for example, yes, when he says, where do you come from, right? And he says, yes, from Horsham. It's like, well, we don't know necessarily. I don't know, but it must mean something to people from England, from London. And it must have definitely meant something at that time. You know what I mean? Like, oh, I come from West LA, or I come from, you know, wherever you're in New York. Maybe you come from there.
Especially England, still like where you come from, it says a lot about you, you know.
Sure.
So it's even more than, you know, LA or New York. Like accents in England and locations are very still to the day, you know, are all very different, you know. So from somebody from England, even if they read this today, probably, oh, Horsham, oh, he, you know, they probably already know who he, you know, he will come from you know, from somewhere that is affluent, you know?
Affluent, and I think, well, he inherited money, but the money is kind of dirty money in a way.
Yeah.
You know, maybe, well, we can say that, but they talk about a chain of events, you know.
Yeah, I mean,
it's definitely a chain of events.
He knows, but you know, one thing before when he says, "Oh, you come from Horsham," you know, the character, probably because he's also like scared and you know, but he doesn't ask Sherlock, "Oh, how do you know?" You know, but Sherlock, he's like showing off, you know, because he says, "I guess from Horsham," and then Sherlock is the one that says, "Oh, you know, I know because the client check," you know. So Sherlock, he likes to show off, you know.
And also, I think, you know what's cool, since you're talking about that, like that connection that the reader has with the stories, because we already know that Sherlock is able to do that, you know. So it's like, oh, we know where he's coming from, but young Openshaw doesn't know, you know.
Right. He's new for that. So exactly. So that's also a way to tell him, look, I know what you know about this is my profession, you know, like I'm gonna find out and help you, you know. Yeah.
It comes like it's a flash, and it's in the course of the story, very significant flash, because there later is the chalk quarry that appears. It's central to what happens to the young man's father. And there's a moment, a wonderful moment in the story where we get Watson's own impression, his own impression of Sherlock Holmes. And
that's like a description of all
the very of like a superhero. Yeah,
exactly. But it's like a very itemized description.
Yeah,
like he does this, he loves this, he eats this, he sleeps with this. It's like very doctor-like.
But it's
wonderful. Yeah. And that's his Holmes himself appreciates it. He said it's something that Watson stated to him earlier, in an earlier phase. Now we have Watson himself in recollection.
He says go step by step, right?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, exactly. I don't know if we should go to that part of where he talks about all the description, you know, or we should wait.
I think we should just let's do it chronologically, if you don't mind.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, we can jump around, but I just want to get to the beginning of the story with the grandfather, because that's also really interesting in terms of like the American Civil War, you know. So he was British, and he migrated to the United States, his grandfather, right?
Yeah, he was a colonel. Yeah.
Oh, he was
His Uncle Elias.
his uncle.
Oh, his uncle, right? Yeah.
Oh, okay. So he says my grandfather had two sons, right? One of the sons, so it starts really way back.
Yeah.
And then one of the sons is his uncle, who migrated to the United States.
Exactly. Yeah, he's the one that became a colonel.
And then we know too, family with a family of means, because they had a factory that made the unbreakable up and shut bicycle tire. And if you show me,
I was like, wait, what are they? I need one.
I do too. We still need one. I'd like to see that.
It would be interesting to check on that. You know, maybe they
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder how it was migrating to the United States in the 19th century. So it must have migrated, like, say, like mid 19th century, right?
Yeah, because if he arrived to the U.S.
It doesn't say exactly, but
exact, yeah.
Well, he was there to see the Civil War,
right, and to fight in it. No,
So,
to become a colonel,
yeah.
Right? And so he goes back to England in 1869,
Exactly.
or in
But
1870.
this is very interesting because, you know, there's a lot of information there where he talks about how he fights, you know, for Jackson, then with Hood, and then with Lee, you know, when he retracts, you know, then he goes back, you know. So, you know, makes me wonder how he was a hardcore, you know.
Well, but at the same time, you know, like I do want to say something about that, because it seems like, okay, he becomes a planter in Florida, right?
Yeah.
And you know what I mean? It's like the circumstances also, like,
right.
I'm sure, like, if he hadn't joined the Confederate Army, they wouldn't have, as particularly as a foreigner, you know what I mean? Like, maybe they would have just deported him or something. I don't know.
Yeah, he got to stay and possibly take part in that preservation of that Southern life upon which his plantation would have depended on the late labor.
If you're a planter, you know, in the 1850s, you have land to protect, and
maybe he had slaves too.
Oh, of course. And then, you know, that means that you have to protect your land, and, you know, a way to show support, but also as they will support you back. What do? You join Jackson's army, you know.
And you know, so this story gets published in like the 1890s, 1880s, but so this is not that far away from the war, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like
people still alive,
you know, and
within 30 years of memory. I mean, it's
still a hot button issue, as they say today.
Right. But it's amazing because not to go back, you know, and I don't like to even, you know, I want to leave that in the past, you know, but if we think of the 45th, who did he have behind him when he was in the White House? He had a portrait of Andrew Jackson, you know.
Right. There you go. But are they referring to Andrew Jackson here?
Yeah.
Yeah, Andrew it'd be Stonewall Jackson, and
well, that's a different Jackson then.
From Stonewall Jackson, yeah.
Right.
No, wait, no, Andrew Jackson was later, yeah.
Right.
So the dates. This is Stonewall Jackson, yeah. So this is different.
And Robert E. Lee, right?
And Robert Lee, right, yeah.
Who, like, we have seen a lot of people. Well, we have seen
some people taking
problematic in terms of their statues and all of that.
Yeah.
So it brings us right to the contemporary world. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's very. Yeah.
You know what? We're living it, and I remember, and it's becoming vivid to me. Like even in my own family, my grandfather from Texas, as he became much elder, my mom said, "You know what? He's every summer. It seems like he's reliving the Civil War, even though he was born after it." in 1899. But
it's such a fascinating thing, fascinating like history that it has spawned so many works of art. And I was listening to Guns N' Roses, you know, the band, earlier today. There's a song called Civil War, which is such a good song.
Yeah,
and there's like documentaries and books, and it's just, even through art, you know, you can't stop. Keeps on giving.
A heap of books and illustrated, all these books that came down through my family, through my German grandfather on one side, who just bought a lot of books, and you see there were tons of Civil War histories. And we've got these Harper's Illustrated, which they didn't have cameras, but they had engravings of all these Civil War scenes. It was it definitely.
And just think of the strength of the symbols and of the Texas flag. You know, I mean, we're probably going to talk about that, but how we still have the same flag from 1839. You know, and how symbolic is that flag? You know, until you know today. I mean, we saw how symbolic was even the day of the Capitol Capitol attacks.
You know that also in the story, Watson just says something that, or Sherlock Holmes, what he's telling at the end, he's telling Dr. Watson about the KKK. He gives him a little like chronology of the KKK, of the beginnings of the KKK, and then he says something, I don't know the exact words, but he goes like, he says something like, it's like an illness or like a disease that like sprouts or you know happens now and
then, just dies away and then comes back, right?
Exactly, like an itch or something like that. I think that's so like powerful. Spot on in some ways, you know.
I mean, think about it. That was, you know, in almost 200 years, 180 years ago, and we're still here with the same. You know, it still comes back, and he will die and it will come back. You know, it's there's no, you know, I mean, there's really no way to kill it, you know, because it will come back sometimes stronger. You know, I mean, one of the goals, I mean, hopefully it will happen from Biden, is to eradicate white supremacists and these organizations, that there always will be rebels, you know, and you know.
That's something, you can't eradicate hate.
You can't.
Nor can you eradicate love.
Right.
And maybe the two one needs to dissolve into the other.
You know, and the sometimes the best way is to just let it fade away on its own, just forget it, you know, because if you just, you know, like anything, if if you reinforce it, like you try to suppress it, sometimes it comes stronger, you know.
But you know, just to like also, I think every country has its own yin and yang dichotomy. You know what I mean? So, I mean, in the United States, it's particularly strong because it was like, in terms of the Civil War, you had like two, or like pre-superpowers fighting against each other with like in a civil war. But you know, in like Latin America and South America, we have had civil wars before, like very contradictory, where good and evil get mixed in, and you know, it's not as clear, and but it's not as explosive because obviously it wasn't, you know, the United States fighting against the United States, you know,
smaller countries. And
but anyway, Watson, I'm sorry, I always confuse them. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle is able to use this history, which is not something that he does a lot. It's kind of unique.
Yeah. And
weave it into his story, which is a crime story, you know?
It's fascinating.
You know what I learned by reading of this was one that actually the Klan in the early 20th century, it had actually subsided, but as you say, it didn't quite go away. And The Birth of a Nation, that movie was made, and it even gave the Klan, the movie is where the Klan got the idea of starting to use one of its most fearsome symbols, especially when photographed on a dark night in black and white, and that burning cross. And so that, in a way, that's where it got its the almost cure, very low level infection got inflamed again.
I still remember, when I got shown that film in film school, and it was considered one of the best films in history. I mean, it still is. It's
in terms of craft, right?
It's amazingly well done.
But when we were going to school, they showed us those films. I wonder if nowadays, with the way culture has changed, probably I don't know if they would show Birth of a Nation anymore.
But you know what is amazing? Now that you guys live in LA, if you see, I don't know if you guys know, but in the Hollywood theater, the Kodak Theater, the mall, right? Right. When you come in there, they have these huge columns that they look like these film sets. Those are the sets from Birth of a Nation.
Really?
Wow. It may suddenly, we may find ourselves
and so I wonder what will happen with that, because
now that you've said it, maybe you're going to get a crowd of people going there and destroying it. So
the genie is out.
Very controversial. Yeah.
But I want to go back to the story here, and I want to underline this sentence, because I think this sentence, can you guys see it here?
Yeah.
It nails.
I certainly do.
It nails the uncle as a bad guy.
Right.
He had made very considerable fortune in the United States, and the reason why he left the United States was because of his aversion to Black people.
Well,
right?
Is this because is this what I feel? This is more like this is what he told him, what he's telling them, or what is really happening.
Well, I mean, this is what the nephews telling.
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
Quite succinct.
How do we know that that this is true? Because this is
we just gotta take his word for it, because what would be the reason for him to smear his uncle? You know what I mean?
Well, here, because this is key for the story, is what was his real reason? And this is where what I was mentioning at the beginning. What it was his real reason for leaving the U.S.
Okay, so if we take the fact that he hated Black people, right? Then, so he was a racist, and chances are that he was involved with the KKK.
Right.
And
so
implementation operator too. He had an interest in a system that no longer seemed to exist.
This brings a really interesting idea that's kind of like a big, almost biblical idea, which is the fact that poor young Openshaw is a good young fashionable guy. You know what I mean?
Right.
And his uncle was a piece of work.
Uh-huh.
And now he's involved in all these things through almost by inheritance.
It's why he
inherits the money, but he also inherits the sins of his forefathers.
It's interesting where later on where his uncle tells him, maybe I'm killing you by giving you this inheritance, or maybe if you give this to somebody, they it's almost like killing them, So he knows
he feels
of the weight, of this, of the consequences.
And he says, like, if you don't want it, then just give it to your worst enemy.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly.
So he's really, it's a big idea that Conan Doyle is playing with, this idea of inheritance and, you know, hidden curses almost, right?
Yeah. You know.
And it's a curse that comes, well, a question I came to in reading this is that, you know, when we look at the whole story, what's the greater cause? Again, we get to something like the weight of the past and the burden of inheritance, and also that it's a greater force. It's a providence that comes back through the KKK to go down the series of persons. We have the young man's uncle, we have his father, Joseph, and then we know what happens to the young man himself. And after
he moves in with his uncle, right?
Yeah, and
how does that happen? I forget. How does he end up moving in?
What I remember vividly about that is another, just kind of for the dossier of the uncle's character. He's a very sullen person who doesn't leave his home.
Yeah,
he drinks a lot of brandy, and
which is American. Brandy is American. Is that correct?
Well, it was kind of a British thing too.
No, never mind that.
An elixir, and often given to women who have fainted. Maybe she needs a bit of brandy.
And a lot of women faint in Sherlock Holmes stories. Right? Usually, that's like a very old.
Bring some brandy, quick.
Even before he receives the letter, he's still always locking himself, right? So
it's like he's feeling guilty, or
exactly. Like, there's guilt. There's, he knows what he did in America, and he's traumatized by it, and he, and like they said, it's interesting that he moves to this land in England, that is cold, that is unpleasant. It's almost as if he's seeking punishment,
Yeah, there one.
And then he begs Openshaw's father to let young Openshaw live with him. So so it's the uncle's idea to bring the nephew in.
And
sorry, you were saying.
You were saying, Grady? Yeah.
Yeah, about you brought out. You see very much like the weight of somebody who comes back to England and you're adding more credence to the fact that he did profit in a tainted way, and it passes on. He embraces his nephew, but also in turn taints his nephew with doubt over the use of this wealth and I begin to see in all of that too, where it's a deep reflection on the British Empire within its coziest confines. It is a mirror of what a vacuum cleaner with lots of tubes all around the globe did to come make good old England as merry as it was.
And to put it in vulgar terms, that vacuum cleaner with lots of tubes is going to suck in some crap, now and then from its historical wrongdoings and whatnot, and unfortunately for young Openshaw, it just happens to him, that like, what did he know,
Yeah, because he is in a way the very fresh and
and there's a lot of similarities with Nazi Germany, and you see how many soldiers and Nazi supporters they moved all around the world, especially Latin America, and you will have these kind of characters that they will lock themselves up, you know. They will always, you know, they will hide from the world, and they will be afraid for the rest of their lives, you know, thinking that somebody was going to catch them, you know. So you had all these guys, all these people that they found them when they were 80 years old, 85, and they found out that they were, you know, Nazi soldiers, or they were at the concentration camps, doing something to the Jews, to the prisoners, you know. So
Yeah, you escape it.
Yeah.
Don't live it down. Even if you go to the outbreak resort in Tierra del Fuego, you know, live out your days. They may be comfortable, but they are not peaceful.
Right, yeah.
You know, the uncle seems to have changed his ways, and he's pretty nice to the nephew. And besides his like heavy drinking, and I mean, it doesn't say exactly, but
yeah, but they play games, backgammon, right, cricket, and they he seems.
He seems to be riding that wave of recovery or you know, forgetfulness, and until one day in March 1883 he gets a letter, right? And that letter has 5 orange pips, which I had to look up. You know, they're like seeds. I don't know.
They're orange seeds, and
the orange.
It sounds like in Spanish when we say pepas.
Pepas.
In the lore of the clan, the purpose of the pips was to say, complete your orders or die. You know, it was a code.
You know, and it's interesting because every organization, you know, they have some sort of a symbolic way to kill their enemies or traitors. I was reading about how the mafia, they, for a traitor, they stick a stone inside somebody's throat. So I was reading now how it's still happening today, but now, you know, before the rock used to mean like the lowest, or, you know, we're gonna put it inside your throat. But now what they do is they found they have found people now that they stick their cell phones in their throat, you know, and it's as telling them all, you know, because now our cell phone is everything, right? We do everything with our cell phone. We're gonna put all that inside you, you know. So there was a case of this immigrant in Italy, where the cops had to help him, you know, because he was bleeding to death and he had a cell phone inside his throat. Yeah.
So nowadays, if the story were to be modernized, it would be 5 orange cell phones or something. You know, I happen to have one right here, just so you know.
And yeah, just making connections.
The cell phone.
Yeah, just making connections.
It's a really interesting thing.
Right. Yeah.
It's funny. Like we overcome the evils of the past, but suddenly we revamp them in new and incredible ways.
And that stuff is eternal, you know.
You're very creative when it comes to finding ways on inflicting pain.
Yeah. Wow. And this guy's pain is both psychological and as well as physical, you know. So when he gets the letter, when he gets the 5 orange pips and the letter, he goes the color of, how do you say this, putty?
Putty, yeah.
Putty. What is this?
Putty. Oh, that's it's the gray material they put.
Gray, yeah, it's gray, right? Gray color.
Panes. Install the glass, and it's the soft stuff that holds in the windows and fills.
Oh, like putty, you know, like, yeah, to block like holes. You know, it's like these.
Holes
like,
oh, that's what they're talking
about. Yeah, and then it's gray, and and it's
like, yeah.
It's like elastic cement, you know?
I know, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, in a story I've been working on called "History of Violence in Watsonville." It's an ongoing story, but
Yeah, it's a good point to like plug in your work, Grady. I think Graydon Miller is the author of Havana Brotherhood and writer of many amazing stories, some of them in the vein of Sherlock Holmes. And one of the stories is History of Violence in Watsonville, right?
Yeah, in which I have a phrase like the face of the putty face of the cop illuminated by his lantern, the guy who never introduced himself. And that's what I see. If you're pulled over at night and one of those guys appears, they're gonna have a putty face. It's gray, it's bloodless.
Yeah. Or they describe that sometimes. I read when they beat somebody up, you know, they punch them in their face, they say they left their face like putty, like a putty or like a pudding, you know, or
Yeah.
I heard in, you know, books and movies where somebody, you know, the way the threat is, I'm gonna leave your face like a putty or like a pudding, you know. Yeah. You know.
And well, that's enough to really
Unrecognizable.
scare the uncle. You know, my God, my sins have overtaken me, right?
Yeah, he, you know, and it's very interesting how, yeah, he describes that and how he lives, you know, where you can see he retires to his room, leaving me palpitating with horror. So in that moment, he knows that he has to find out what is about this letter, you know. So it's very interesting how he narrates. He tells Watson and Sherlock about.
Right. It's like a story within a story, you know, and also because they're right as the story gets narrated, they're in the flat, you know, in Sherlock Holmes's flat. One and two is that they go into this story, you know, that's like in another realm, in another world with like connections to America and whatnot. I find that so interesting.
Yeah, it's sweet. It's Conan Doyle taking us on that full rich adventure, even from a drawing room in London, and it gives it vivid life. The contrast, the weather.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, how such a good writer that even though we're in this gray, rainy night, and by telling this story, now we are in a sunny Florida,
Florida,
and in the, you know, in
Savannah,
Texas,
Georgia.
Right. Also, you see how like how do you call it? Exotic the United States must have been for the readers of Watson, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle at the time, you know, like because he brings up the KKK, and I think what's happening is that the average reader probably doesn't make the connection.
The average reader is just like Watson hearing Holmes say, "What, you don't know about the king?"
Yeah, exactly. He didn't know about it.
He thinks it's somebody's kind of initials, right? Like Keith, Conan.
And Watson is, you know, he's a doctor, he's educated. So just imagine, you know, most of England at the time, they wouldn't know much about the KKK. They didn't know much about the US, right?
Well, like you said, Juan, you know, with the beginning of that movie, the Triumph, no, not Triumph of the Will.
Birth of a Nation.
Birth of a Nation, it became more popular, right?
Right, yeah.
So this is pre-Birth of a Nation. You know what I mean? So it's like, maybe it's like a secret organization kind of thing.
Right, because, yeah, Birth of a Nation is one of the films that that in that time people will make a reference about the US through Birth of a Nation, you know, because there weren't that many films at that time.
And you might say it's one of the few films. We always say that history is written by the victors, and in this case, it's an early motion picture exploiting all the recourses of a feature film and spectacular episodes. It's told from the point of view of the losing side of history, and having lost, I would say, the Civil War, it was defeated and then kind of festered, and we're on the point. We're still dealing with it too, but yeah, that makes it a kind of a toxic commodity, the birth of a nation. Film history we accept, but it's a difficult one.
You know what's really cool in terms of like Sir Arthur Conan Doyle is that he touches upon this really hot topic, you know, like difficult thing, and he comes out well, unscathed.
Well,
you know, like, he doesn't say anything like terrible or ahistorical, or you know what I mean?
Right.
It's like he comes out on the good side.
But in that time, if he had been a racist or he had said anything, he wouldn't have any problem, right?
Exactly.
He was not under pressure of being, a non-racist, you know. But here we see the true nature of Conan Doyle. You know, that he supported. He was a humanitarian, you know.
Right, cosmopolitan, open-minded, all of that.
Right.
Stuff, you know?
Yeah.
So.
So like you said, that
is a scientific medical character. He was not given to outlandish. He had the expressions. You know, he did not. His words are carefully. They're moderated. They're moderated by the observable facts. And I don't think he needs to go into the. It's for the reader to take these events and to take them into the reader's moral realm.
Right.
And you say it's quite a feat. Yeah, indeed, Conan Doyle does come away with a story that's good for all times.
And it's still edgy. You know what I mean? It's still kind of like you're dealing with it, and you're like. It's still alive, which is really neat, like so long afterwards.
There's the aspect of the mystery story it kind of brought to the fore, which is that it doesn't all have to be spelled out. Not at all. Just if you present enough of the edgy facts together in this kind of perfect cocktail as we have here, that's fine. And as much as we love and crave the end to a mystery, the best thing is just the presentation of it that possibly still leaves a hole for many questions that I have.
What are the questions? Okay, like let's look at the murders, right? You have the first murder of the uncle.
Yeah, question.
They want to kill him because he kept a diary. Is that correct?
Yeah, he has the names. Yeah, I think he has the names of the members.
It's a box of the papers, and in a way, if we talk, it's what Hitchcock would have called a MacGuffin. It is a device that's essentially meaningless, but it propels your story completely. So when I read this story over, I realized, that box of papers that later gets burnt.
Right.
And with the instruction, there's an instruction to place something by the sundial.
What's the sundial's like role in these? Because after the uncle dies, then the father gets the 5 orange pips, right? Young Openshaw's father, and he says, "I don't want anything to do with the sundial or whatever." Like he's a different kind of.
In so many words too, he says, here in this civilized country, will have none of this tomfoolery.
Oh, but what is he talking about? What tomfoolery is he referring
to? The demands that the box and a note be placed, a note describing the contents were already burnt by the uncle.
Because that's very important, you know, because we have Sherlock Holmes telling them that he has to put the most important for Oppenheimer, is for him to put this in the box, right? What we call the sundial, so.
Wait,
So
sorry, the sundial. What is the sundial exactly?
Oh, it's just. Do you mean literally? It's the sun
box, right? Huh?
The sun clock on a pedestal you have in a garden, where according to where the sun is in the day.
Yeah, it's clock, right? So the sun gives the hour.
It will point to the hours around the clock.
Yeah, reloj the
I
sol.
don't know if that I may be you realize that's what it was, but ask a question.
Right?
There's an answer.
So that's where they will put the letters. So Sherlock, what he tells Oppenheimer that he has to do is to leave the letters there. It's a way for him to prevent him for him getting killed.
But it feels almost like a supernatural, like it's burning and all of this, but it's almost like because of the shape of the thing and the idea that it's a sundial, it feels ritual.
Throughout the story, I feel like beyond all the questions, like did the sailor clansmen come ashore to face each of the three victims of that family? And I keep getting back to this story as a deeply spiritual I would say judge, or the power that decides the fate of all these parties, the family, the victims, and then you have the sailors on the ship that are bound back to Georgia. And Holmes devises the best thing, he writes a letter to be sure they won't be punished for these and charged with murder when they get into the port in Savannah, Georgia.
Can I make a parenthesis, Graydon here? In the back window behind you, I see the gales of Hollywood. The weather is very kind of wild, it seems like in the story.
Almost, let me tell you, it wouldn't be too much of a stretch to say this feels a little bit like a drawing room in London today. The skies are cloudy and a bit turbulent, and
looks a little bit.
Obviously a wind out there.
Now the question is, would you be Watson or would you be Sherlock?
Gosh, a little bit of both. A little bit of, right?
And that's interesting that if you think about some of the best writers, they have this idol, this persona that they use. We have Plato, right? Socrates.
Who, yeah.
We have Dante having also these two, this angel, Virgilius. But so it's interesting because here Conan Doyle will be, in a way, Watson, right? Because he's a doctor, and it's this kind of humble persona that he's put in. Is I'm a doctor, but I'm not as smart as Sherlock, and because Sherlock is the one that is going to give us the truth. Same with Socrates, right? Plato is not the smart one; he's the student, and he's trying to figure out what Socrates is going to come out with, and then he has, but then we ask ourselves, who is really the smart one, because sometimes it makes you wonder, like maybe Watson knows, or maybe Plato is the one that maybe, as we know, Socrates wasn't real,
Well, also, Watson is the one who narrates the story, and we were talking about it last week. Like, we're addicted or drawn to the stories of Conan Doyle. And so what do we like in it? Like Watson's rhythms. His story. He's a storyteller. He's really charming.
The music of his words, and he's a avuncular character. He's he's a foil to Holmes. I mean, there's such opposites. I certainly believe Watson is he's a pudgy one, and Holmes is a stoic, hawk-like figure. You know,
and
one is the owl, one is
dark.
you know.
But he keeps us in the ground. You know, he's a commoner like us. You know, like a human. You know, he's not a superhero like he's Sherlock Holmes, right? Because Sherlock Holmes, he can do anything. He can box. He can, you know, do anything, right?
He does cocaine.
He's a self-poisoner with
self-poisoner. What a good way! What an amazing way of describing it. You know, as
Yeah,
opposed to saying drug addict, which seems so like pedestrian. Like
I love that phrase in that description we have of him.
I think having Watson tell the story, it's what makes us be closer to and be more transported into the story with them. You know, if it was Sherlock telling the story, we don't have the connection because he's so different from us.
He's not emotional, and you know, if in any stories we see the dark side of Sherlock Holmes come out, it's this one. You know, like when we get to it, it's like he makes a few errors that in a way he's to blame for young Openshaw's death.
But you know, at the same time, we show that he really cares, right? Because when he finds out of the tragedy and how he failed, he makes it all in his way to take on revenge.
You know? But you know, he says something really ugly also. I mean, just to play devil's advocate, he says like, "Oh, they have really hurt my pride."
Right.
It's like, it's not about your pride, Sherlock. You know?
Yeah, he's not. Yeah, that's a good point.
That's maybe we're finding out that Sherlock Holmes is a narcissist.
You're a maniac. Yeah.
Well, but because he's so smart, also, you know, like, okay, I mean, I didn't want to get to this yet, but like, you know, may as well. So like in the last story, the man with the twisted lip, how did he figure out the crime? He sat cross-legged and smoked for a whole night, right? In other words, by thinking, right, for 8 hours. When we hear of young Openshaw being in danger, he favors thinking over protecting young Openshaw. You know what I mean? So because he's a thinker, right? So he prefers to deal with that realm as opposed to being just like protector, you know, like a security guard or something. And I think that's his like really.
Maybe that's his Achilles, his flaw.
That's his flaw. I mean, his flaw, but also his strength.
Right.
Is how, and we see even from the beginning how he's almost meditating in a meditative state and just reflecting and thinking about the problem, because that's the only way he can solve it. You know, because he can be objective that way. You know. If he will just go right out into the street and talk to people, he will just be confused, you know. But being on his own, he can really find out what is the problem. You know? And this is where, when Watson talks about his qualities, but also talks about how, you know, it was very interesting because it really brings us to this era, to the internet era, you know, the era of having all the knowledge, right? Because he talks about how it's great. It's very important to have all this knowledge, but it's key to store it away when you don't use it and focus only on what's important, you know. But he talks about how if somehow I'll have all the knowledge, I wouldn't need to go outside. That's in a way what he's saying, and then made me wonder now the new Sherlocks in this era. You know, maybe there are some people or some kids or people that they don't need to leave their houses because they find everything on internet, right? Anything. Like, I mean, I wonder how many cases can just be solved just being at home and having all the internet.
Face recognition cameras, you know, like if you like looking at the, you know, Capitol building trespassing thing that happened, rebellion, whatever you want to call it, right? A lot of the people being arrested have been recognized through
On face
cameras.
recognition. That makes you wonder how has changed, because before in Watson's in 1800s, 1900s, a lot of it was field work when it comes to detectives, right?
Mm.
You know, how much of that has changed? How much time now a detective goes, in this case, goes to the Capitol and fingerprints and this? Not much, right? Because as you said, now you have you don't need that. Now you have face recognition, you know?
Yeah, I heard of she's a woman who worked in environmental analysis, but suddenly she's turned to researching all the images in her home and doing tremendous strides towards identifying the parties that were involved in that act of rebellion.
But you know, it makes me also think about how now with the internet, with everything that we have at our fingertips, we wouldn't have a Sherlock Holmes, because the qualities that he developed about the smell, about seeing, analyzing the type of mud that you have in your shoes and find out where you're coming from. Now that's lost. So at the same time, we also have lost a lot of these aspects about our lives because we just rely on the internet,
Right.
For
also they use just to, they have now, how do you call it? They can look at blood and link it to their people's DNA. So there's still chemistry and physicality. It's just
science,
you know.
For what it's worth, we go back to the time of when writing was developed and the oral tradition was lost in the Mediterranean in Greece, and the fear was when people write, we will lose memory, the power of memory. And that's why I think I'm so glad you underscored that line where Holmes basically says, I keep such things as in my brain as are pertinent, and the rest of the things, they go on the bookshelf.
Selective memory,
and we are at this moment right now because on your telephone, you can keep like an ad infinitum record of your days and meals and loves, and it's a digital highway to eternity. And is it of use to us? I think you are really grounding it in that. Here today, I thought, do I need to review all the matters pertinent to the story, the 5 orange pips? No, I don't.
Yes, we do, Grady. Yes, we do. let's get to that. Just kidding. I want to look at can we enumerate the crimes?
But I think that's the, right now our Achilles heel is how. As students, we don't know what is really important. I think the key is how to be selective with knowledge, right? And that's what
to have discrimination in the good sense of the word.
Yeah, because you can read and everything can be important, but then you're not going to learn. But that's the problem now, because everything is important, and we have all documents about anything, now. Before we will have, still now we have, thankfully, somebody like you, Patricio, a teacher that guides students. But problem now is with schools and new schools everywhere. There's coming a moment where there's even in some places where they're thinking of not having teachers, right, and only learning on their own. But the problem with that is that you have no guide, and then you learn everything and nothing, right?
Right. Everything is kind of sort of abstract and big and
just
sweeping statements about the world.
Right. Through the crucible or the distillation of the teacher. The teacher able to put in relief, and yeah, I think learning without a guide, personal guide, it's even though the guides themselves may leave just something so little, just maybe a nice compliment or maybe maybe a terrible grade, but they leave something.
Yeah.
And,
And it's interesting because this, like you said, this is a beautiful. This couldn't be more. Couldn't hit more now our times that this. A man should keep his little brain attic stocked with all the furniture that he's likely to use, and the rest he can put away in the lumber room of his library, where he can get it if he wants it. So, of course, we support free information. Everybody having all these different, sources of information and sharing their sources of information, but it makes you wonder if wouldn't be better if we create some limit to that, but not only limit, but also create some sorts of approval about this information. How can I know if what I'm reading is really important or if it's truthful, if it's real? How?
That just brings the question too. If that's something. Do you think that's something to be decided beyond the individual level, or is it something? Maybe we need teachers. Maybe teachers at least to guide us to the.
We need teachers. We need some sort of we need to tell our students. They need to know who's the teacher. Because in the internet, everybody is a teacher, right? I mean, every source you have is teaching you something. But what is behind that source? We need that guy.
Having the discipline to forego things that are not pertinent to whatever you're doing. You know what I mean? Like
focus. Yeah.
Focus. Let's focus on the crimes.
Yeah.
Let's look at the first crime. Okay. How does he die? Do we know exactly?
It's interesting because they somehow have a pattern in the crimes, and at least that's how
Yes, I actually. There's a reason for index cards.
Exactly. I almost want to do like a visual.
And this is what an index card. Mine.
Oh, you did it. Excellent. Wow.
I did. And
you did focus. Right?
He was the initial threatening messages. Well, what Elias said, getting his pips. My God, my sins have overtaken me, and it was written in red ink, which was really kind of popular in the 1800s and Victorian age, when people wrote with ink.
They wrote more with red than black.
This was red.
Right, but what did they in the Victorian times? Did they write more with black or red ink or both?
Oh, certainly more. Probably more with black and blue.
Black and blue.
I was the neighbor as a kid when
red more expensive.
I don't know.
Interesting to
and
check.
Green too. Sometimes green ink. It was 1883, March 10th. The letter arrived, and it was from Port of India, Pondicherry, and he was up to his old tricks, getting stupid drunk and staggered through I believe, a forest, and ends up drowning in a pool of about 2 feet of water.
Yeah, we have the quote here. We found him when he went to search. When we went to search for him, face downward, a little green skunked pool, which lay at the foot of the garden.
Right in his own garden. There's not even a forest. And I get back to the kind of the mantra in this story. For each of the 3 victims, we get to the uncle, the father, and then the son. He always has that mantra: no violence. There was no sign of any violence.
Right.
How does the father die? So they think that he just died out of drunkenness, right?
It's almost like
Joseph.
Was it like he drowned on his?
The one who drowned
on this spot, which is almost impossible,
Right, but it's almost like the authorities are so dumb, and Sherlock Holmes always points that out, that Scotland Yard, is not the smartest.
Right.
That's what he says. Particularly the detectives that work the cases, And so
Yeah.
maybe they're just lazy and let go
Always
because
fun
okay,
to
they just
have
say
that.
like, oh, he's a drunkard. He just drowned in his own liquor or regurgitation or whatever. So
he knows that his uncle, he's a survivor. He didn't want to die. So he
he
wouldn't
knew how to
choose,
drink.
he wouldn't choose
That,
suicide.
that usually is a good symptom of somebody who manages to get through quite a lot. It seems like that is a vice that does help some people to achieve age in spite of. We could take our Bukowskis or our Onettis.
Exactly what I was getting.
Fill an Olympic swimming pool with
Yeah,
their.
if you drink a lot, you don't want to like lay down, face down.
The
Bukowski has talked about it.
How do you guys think that he died? I mean, I really think that maybe he had some drinks, but he got somebody just put his face on the mud and made him drown there.
Doesn't Sherlock Holmes solve it at the end?
That's perfectly logic. I like that because now we're taking it out of the ghostly spirit punishment realm.
That's interesting, Grady, because the story never went to that realm in my viewpoint. But maybe you guys can tell me, like, did you ever think it was like a ghost or something like that? Because I never thought about it that way.
No, I never thought about it. No way. Yeah, I don't. Yeah, in that sense,
I don't believe the ghost would fit in Sherlock Holmes' world, but I love that you're being the Sherlock Holmes for the subtext or the undertext of the story, where we can point the finger.
But interestingly enough, we know that Arthur Conan Doyle was very much into the supernatural.
Yeah, he was part of the spiritual movement in England, and he will go to a medium.
Yeah. Later, particularly later in life. But I have a little theory about that, like that I'm just gonna say that Conan Doyle got into Sherlock Holmes and created Sherlock Holmes as a very kind of logical detective, like extremely logical, to balance his own like leanings towards the supernatural. And when he exhausted it, he let go. And he just like, when he exhausted the world of logic through Sherlock Holmes, he's like, okay, I'm just gonna go. And then like at the end of his life, he became a lecturer for the supernatural, like mediums. Like
right. But interesting in this, of these 3 generations dying, connecting it with the guild and with what the uncle was part of, all of them dying. It's almost also a way of Doyle saying they had to die. They were part of this, and it was they couldn't get away out of that. What they did couldn't be erased. Because if we think about it, it's one of the few stories where the problem is not solved, and the client dies. That's very unique. Normally the client survives and thanks Sherlock, but so it's almost as this, they were already part of this. They were part of the KKK, like it or not, and they couldn't get away from it. It was
even the son
destiny. Yeah.
And at the end of the story, the ending is like we had said. I had told Graydon earlier. It feels what was the word? It feels like the hand of God or like the divine providence.
Right.
Like saying like, okay, these guys the killers are so bad
that
their ship is going to drown.
The ship drowns, exactly. It's like they were all part of this, and they had this curse. They were cursed, and it's like a horror movie. these people are gonna die no matter what.
And guess what kills him? This is so beautiful about the way Doyle puts it. The gale, the weather.
The same weather where he came, you know.
Exactly.
So we have the character that's beautiful. How coming almost with this weather, with this course.
Equinoctial winds. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
so tight, and it's like a wonderful little machine. Like the way it's built.
You're so lucky with the art of Conan Doyle. He really does skate over the nitty gritty of the murders.
He doesn't care about that, huh? He doesn't go into the
It's good for the reader too, because it allows us to swallow this story, and we see in our discussion how many layers it has, and how many we are coming around to this idea that is hand of God, providence. It's even
almost as if, you know, Sherlock he has no power over it, you know, like he almost finds that out, you know.
This is a little ship in the wind, right? Like,
oh, and the last thing, the last scrap of it was just the initials of the ship, Lone Star, LS. It was named after the state, you know, reminiscent of the state of Texas, which
yeah, I mean that's how he finds who they are, you know, and where they are. And I that's amazing, because, you know, what I love about narrative, about fiction, is how it can hook you into other things, right? So especially this for students, or it's a great way, you know, to hook the reader into history. Because now when I was reading this, I wanted to know everything about, you know, the creation of the Lone Star, about Texas, the reason why they had only only one star. So I think there's not a better vehicle than fiction for people to be engaged in truth, right?
Well, earlier we were talking, Juan, about how the world is so full of information, and we can't really have a frame. It's so difficult to have a frame of sort of a discipline, right? But something like a story, like here, right? It gives you a discipline or a frame of reference, or a kind of limits, right? It tells you, it gives you like, okay, you're into history, you want to understand this story, okay, go ahead and read up on the Civil War and who General Lee was, the history of the KKK, you know, sea travel in the late 19th century. You know, it really gives you a kind of compass, you know, this world full of information. It's like, okay, you can start here.
It's the beauty of the story.
Yeah, and even after reading it,
right?
It creates, but it also creates creates fascination with history, because it makes you want to know more. You know, why did Doyle he chose this story? Why, you know, what happened with the Lone Star? You know, was the colonel that was in the ship that sank, was where he came with that name, you know.
Juan David, I have one question, and well, did the Lone Star State, you've studied into it now, did it exist solely because this group of Yankee settlers wanted to perpetuate a slave state?
No, no, I mean, it's, you know, there has been a lot of controversy about that, you know, because I was reading how the flag, you know, has red, white, and it has one star, right? And white is for purity, red is for bravery, and the one star is because it was one of the first states that it was it's considered its own republican state, you know.
For that period, it was a country. It was a country for
their own country, right?
Actually,
you know?
that's on a, with California has that distinction too. We are a separate country for a while.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, it's so symbolic how it still is considered in a way its own country. You know, we saw that clearly with elections, right? They haven't changed, and
It's our own culture. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
very much so. Even though California, I think you go over the Tehachapi Mountains and in the San Joaquin Valley, I tend to think there is not one California. There's
those
Well, there isn't one anything. I mean, just to get to
yeah, one.
you know.
Right.
But,
I mean,
but you know, the
same.
United States is a collection of republics in a way, right? Of like little nations and
Yeah,
working the states. You know, there was something that I wanted to bring up that in terms of like looking up and stuff, because I also looked up some stuff. And here, you know, if you guys read this sentence here that says, others were of date during the reconstruction of the United States and of a date during the reconstruction of the United States and were mostly concerned with politics, for he had evidently taken a strong part in opposing the carpetbag politicians who had been sent down from the north. Do you guys know, are you familiar with the carpetbag politicians? Because I looked it up. And
yeah, it's because first of all, it's a suitcase, right?
right, it's a special kind of suitcase.
It's a suitcase that comes attached with, tell me if I'm wrong, and politicians that from the north.
And do you know why they call it this carpetbag?
Oh, because it was, kind of come to the southern state and with their suitcase. Carpetbag was a old kind of valise, valise.
Right. But the reason is because they needed to make a bag that was light, right? Like a carpet, flexible, durable, and cheap.
And then you can use the carpet.
And so it's called a carpet bag. So a carpet bag politician is these politicians who came,
be bought or last.
who came from the north to the south to perform whatever they needed to do, their quick, legal trades or whatever, right? Trades. And so because it was such a quick trip, they had to carry, they couldn't carry like a box. So that's what they used like really back in the day, like wooden boxes, right?
So is he trying to say that they are cheap politicians, like
people
nomad
who don't
politicians?
care, who didn't, well, it's just people who were traveling politicians who came in quickly with a light bag, right? Durable light bag, and then left.
Yeah, and left that impression of resentment in the southern state with its legacy of gentility and also the dark foundations of it. But
exactly. But it's just, I found such an interesting.
Great.
I had no idea what carpet bag was,
To study these things, I feel like it's going to shed much light on now. It's the times we're living.
The resentments and all of that stuff, right?
Yeah, and
excuse me.
Yeah.
So, and then how does the father die?
He dies in the quarry. He dies it's where they have that chalk and clay outside of Horsham. And, this is kind of, that's where he died.
Right. He says like, he gets the 5 pips, right? He says like, I'm not having any of that stuff.
But he's not, he doesn't take it seriously.
And then he ends up dead in the chalk quarry. And his postcard was, which presumably could have also been in red ink it was from Dundee. And I'm not sure if that's like the south of England. So, because that's another one of the conceits of this story is that Holmes pierced what was going on because of the timeline between the postcard from India, and there was a second postcard from Dundee, and the final and fatal postcard for the young son came from East London. itself, which meant they're here. They're here.
They're here, right?
You know, they've arrived, and it would be fun for somebody more patient and logical, perhaps, to go over the story timeline. But I'll trust Watson and Conan Doyle that he did the chronological legwork on this, and that it all fits. It fits like a.
Well, we suspend our disbelief.
Interesting that he was found with a shattered skull, but at the same time, there were no signs of violence. You know, so it makes me wonder again. He fell, or
No
or how?
footmarks, right?
Yeah, how come they yeah then
No robbery.
yeah. It
Yeah,
means he fell. It means
it's repeated once
they
again.
push him.
Maybe this is secretly pointing us to the Providence, blame finger at Providence.
But you look at this beauty, right? In this sinister way, I came into my inheritance. His inheritance is not it is the money, but also it's the violence.
The murder, of course, that happened. Yeah.
He was going to be sent these orange pips with inheritance or without it. He was part of it. It was on his blood, you know. Because even if he didn't receive the inheritance, he still had, or they thought they had the box with the pages incriminating these ex-KKKs, you know.
And also, you know, something in terms of the like supernatural, like it doesn't matter whether there was like a ghost doing this or whatever, or a god, or, you know, God or Jesus or whatever. I think at the end of the day, these are murder or these are deaths, and
Right.
Sherlock Holmes has to deal with it in the realm of men or of humans, you know,
Right, in a
physicality.
scientific way, you know. I mean, I think that's the key with Sherlock in many of his stories is how they look like they were damnations, they were curses, but he finds that there's a scientific reason to it, you know. So I think Sherlock will be against all of that, but then this story, the exception is when he finds that Watson finds out that the Gale, the ship, sank with the assassins.
You know, that reminds me of a lot of like Russian authors, particularly like Dostoevsky, where they are very gifted at giving their characters the opposite qualities, or having their main characters argue the opposite of what they believe in. So let's say Doyle was very supernatural, but his main character, or one of his main characters, Sherlock Holmes, is utterly logical.
And you're pointing to the moral spiritist reading of this story. Actually, we could argue that perhaps in the end, Sherlock himself, he left behind evidence, cold hard evidence, and he instead created a construct from such facts as there were, a construct to punish those who were morally reprehensible. And these were the crew aboard the KKK, the Lone Star ship. I throw that out there. Can
you say that again? I'm not sure I grasp the idea.
The Holmes, given the facts of this case revealed, and given the sinister quality of the KKK, and he knew the people were sending these threatening postcards to the victims from different ports and identified to that ship. Maybe he chose to construct it all into his letter for the police in Savannah to say, hey, when these guys come aboard the ship, they are going to be charged with murder. And I'm saying,
right, but you know,
it's an alternate reading, and not one that has to be accepted, but it would be Holmes abandoning his icy logic.
Yeah.
And,
And- Yeah.
Like giving us a blueprint on how to deal with them or something like that.
putting it in the hands of like we say, he came up with an idea about the danger that was over this young man, but he didn't send out the security guards to protect him. No, he came up with an idea. So in this case, he framed them in a letter that would already be waiting for the ship when it got into the port in Georgia. As we know, though, that never happened. Maybe and
It didn't need to happen, right?
yeah. Instead, the finger of fate took away both Sherlock's pride and the lives of those people aboard the Lone Star.
It also shows one weakness of Sherlock that again goes back with his strength, is because for him to find out the reason of a case, he needs to meditate, go on his own, but then the problem is that he is disconnected from society,
Right. It
from
doesn't see
needs.
the obvious sometimes.
So he's getting ready for going to solve a case, and then Watson tells him, like, don't you know, like, Oppenheimer, he was killed.
Openshaw, yeah.
Openshaw was killed. So it really shows that you also need to be connected, right, to reality. He makes you wonder how many clues did he also lose because he was not reading
Not there on the street, or I think that's reinforces Watson's role. Watson is kind of
right? Watson brings him to reality.
The doctor.
Right?
Right.
Because
With Sherlock Holmes, is that he emphasized getting the bad guys in the big picture as opposed to just protecting the little guy, young Openshaw.
Yeah, which would have saved him.
Like he should have let the other stuff, like, okay, just let it go. I'm going to protect this guy tonight. That's it.
Yeah, that's what definitely the responsive person would do. It's often hard. That's why I always say the detective is so connected to the object of their inquiry, and so in a way that that puts Holmes. He's connected to the KKK in this case more than this innocent kid who himself has a sensitivity that this is a sinister inheritance. I mean, and he's lost his father, and it's a really sad it's
Really
sad
sad,
Holmes story, and
it wouldn't cross Sherlock's mind saying to his client, stay tonight here because you will die if you leave, or you have the risk of dying. He tells him,
there you go.
It's gonna be full of people and you'll be fine.
Right.
But knowing how 2 generations have died, from the family, he should have known better.
Right. But also, it's like on multiple levels, like Openshaw gets the shorter end of the stick because he goes to the police, right? And this is what the police tell him. But so he tells Sherlock Holmes, but they listen to my story with a smile. I am convinced that the inspector has formed the opinion that the letters are all practical jokes, and that the deaths of my relations were really accidents, as the jury stated, and were not connected to the warnings. So the police lets him down, right?
It's heartbreaking because it's so dramatic too. You have something that's for them he was a kook, right? Just another kook, and combined with however he presented the information to him, there they are, the police, and their situation of not being the brightest light in the harbor.
I have a question for you guys. When it comes, this is more about grammar and editing. what do you guys find about his choice of when using dialogue to propel the story forward, or using description? You know?
Yeah, it's this wonderful contrast because his dialogues are so pithy, and they advance the story with just the right, they're interesting and they read quickly, and so it makes it, then again you're plunged in this pleasurable narrative, which always has its rewards of music and wisdom, and then suddenly you have this wonderful free moments of just dialogue, which managed to express so much, and that may be why the Holmes stories lent themselves so easily to all form of mass media, which, by the way, developed especially in a country as large as the United States.
Mm.
We had radio, movies, television, and
Everything about
all of them have put Holmes in a very infinite Freudian place.
And the detective genre, right? Because there were so many different shows, and was Dragnet, right? It was a very famous show, right?
Dragnet, and you can Dragnet, Columbo, the Hardy Boys, young, in the list is
and just
enormous.
makes me think about
Borges was influenced by Sherlock Holmes, by Conan Doyle. A lot. Jorge Luis Borges. And Sherlock Holmes he read Edgar Allan Poe, who invented the detective story, right? But if we read Edgar Allan Poe, Poe feels older and not as kind of made for the modern ear or for the modern reader. But with Sherlock Holmes, it's like we read it today, over 100 years later.
You're like talking to a friend almost.
And the form is perfectly modern and perfectly. It's like this great balance between like realism and idealized, storytelling. Like it gives us the perfect form that as modern writers, with a few changes, there isn't anything where you can say like, oh, this feels so dated or anything. Maybe the language a little bit, but the actual form is wonderful. And then, Jorge Luis Borges said that all we've been doing for people who write detective stories, it's like copying. We're all writing Sherlock Holmes stories, because that's the blueprint. And after that, there's like existential detectives or whatever, postmodern, whatever literature, but he gave us the blueprint, and it's like such a perfect blueprint, I think. So that's what I think of the form.
It makes me think of
adapted, and I'll throw in Raymond Chandler too as a major voice, a unique voice of urban, hard, kind of seen it all, cynical but still a romantic ember in that hardened heart. The voice.
What do you think about it, Juan David, in terms, because you asked it, so you must have formulated yourself like an answer for yourself.
Right. No, I think it made me analyze it and wonder if in any segment it would have been better to use dialogue over narration. But no, I think it's one of the biggest assets about this story is how he's a master at choosing when to use dialogue and when to use narration, and especially an example is the end of the story where, just the last paragraph, he could have had, Sherlock or Watson telling Sherlock, oh, by the way, the Lone Star sank, and goodbye, right? But then we wouldn't have this beautiful poetic ending of the story, and connecting to the beginning of the story about, the wind, right? How the wind is this element that connects the beginning with the end, So he does that in various segments of the story, where he chooses narration when is when is necessary, and he uses dialogue when we're in this moment of speed, of pressure, where, okay, what's happening? You need to go now. You need to do this. He wouldn't use narration and say, Sherlock told the client to go and put the pages on the sundial. No, he uses narration, right? Go now, go, use the, take the train, right?
There's 2 points that are really like going with what you're saying. One of them, when there's the dialogue between Sherlock Holmes and young Openshaw, when he says, just go. I don't know what words he puts in it, but there's a little dialogue right there, right?
Right, yeah.
And the other point of dialogue is when Dr. Watson tells Sherlock Holmes, like, dude, not in those words, right? But he says,
right. And there's even one great moment where also narration where, you have Openshaw, and he's freaking out, right? He's like, he's afraid, he doesn't know what to do, and Sherlock tells him, get your stuff together, right? Like, there's no time for being afraid, for being a coward. Be brave. You need energy, like, pushes him forward, right? So
he does the same thing to Watson when he tells him, like, oh, we're gonna go solve a crime, not in this story, but in another story.
Yeah.
And then Watson is like, but I don't know anything about this crime. It's like, you don't need to know, just come.
Oh, right. So it's this strength, right? That Sherlock has been considered in many stories and by many writers as a bit of a sociopath or a psychopath, right? Because he needs to be objective, but also that gives him the strength to be like,
he's very much the boss too.
You know, to tell the client, you know what, dude, don't go crying. Okay, you need to be right now, be a man. He says it like that. Act man, or you are lost. There's no time for crying right now. Get it done. Okay, go and do this. And uses dialogue, right? Which is it's very helpful to propel the story forward. Yeah.
And that's like a really bad point, because that's when, like, he sends young Openshaw into the.
It backfires, but
I took away from that where he sends him off, he barks the orders out. I feel almost that Holmes was too emotional, like he would chide himself later for that being his weakness, because it's not a calm. What's the best way to give somebody some form of order is to do it with calm and without like, if you're running late driving somebody to a place, I think the least helpful thing to be told is,
then you crash.
You're going to be late. Hurry up.
Wow.
And I think Holmes transmits a bit of that nervousness, and you must go now. Speed.
Okay.
Here it is. Do not lose an instant, and above all, take care of yourself in the meanwhile. For I do not think that there can be a doubt that you are threatened by a very real and imminent danger. How do you go back? By train. It is not yet 9. The streets will be crowded, so I trust that you may be in safety, and yet you cannot guard yourself too closely. I am armed. That is well. Tomorrow I shall see to work upon your case. Well, not really, right?
That's actually, I just got the detail now. He said, I am armed. Indeed. Wow.
So, I mean,
that may be the final bullet in this whole like theory of the higher law calling the shots here.
Literally.
Because,
and
I mean, to us here, most people feel like they find great security in having a gun, and it's kind of like your cure-all for mental illness. And didn't do it for Openshaw, apparently.
Right.
Wow.
Also, it exonerates Sherlock Holmes a little bit because it's like he's got a gun, he's young, you know.
Yeah. You know what is interesting now that you read that part was that Sherlock advises him of not taking revenge. Do not think of revenge or anything of the sort. And at the end of the story,
right,
Sherlock trying to take revenge on them.
It clouds his vision.
Because they hurt his pride, So a lot of this story is interesting because it kind of all backfires on Sherlock, He fails on taking care of his client, of Openshaw, and then he ends up doing what he advised Openshaw not to do.
So Sherlock might be one of the first like anti-heroes of literature, because he's like, in many ways, we have talked about Sherlock Holmes being like ready for mass market and related to comics and stuff like that, right? And the radio, but in other ways, it's too complex to like just lend itself. He's like a kind of Superman in a way.
He is Superman, and he can't.
I'm sorry, not Superman, Batman.
Right. Yeah.
It's hard for him to be the whole show too. That's why you have Watson there, kind of keeping it real.
And it's interesting that even from the 1900s, they made a hero out of Sherlock Holmes, and we have let's call him a hero, that also is a drug addict, right? And he in a way is a decadent, right?
A self-poisoner. How was the wording?
He's a guy that
with cocaine and tobacco,
right? And he's just hanging out at his house, not doing much. Just sometimes he doesn't, take showers or eats or anything at all. He's
how do you call it, depressive? What's the word? Manic, maybe manic depressive.
Yeah, he's like this.
Very possible, because we don't. Yeah, try to imagine the private moments. I mean, I feel like this story is of tragic consequence, as much for young Openshaw perhaps as for Holmes himself too.
It like Conan Doyle leaves him like really exposes poor Sherlock Holmes. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he could definitely be more left this case troubled. I will say that.
Yeah. And look at this. He's marked at 0 at philosophy, astronomy, and politics. So
can we look at that?
Let's go. I think this is a wonderful place to arrive. Yeah.
It's such a like anti-contemporary way of describing a person, because nowadays we're so afraid of like, putting people into boxes, but like here, like literally these are boxes that his friend puts him into. Imagine if we did that to ourselves, like I'm just gonna take Graydon Miller and describe him to you guys, like, and just grade Graydon Miller, like knowledge of anthropology, okay, 7, knowledge of international cuisine, 4.
It would be wonderful homework for us and for our viewers.
We could do it. I'm down for it.
Yeah,
I'm almost ashamed that you be ruthless.
I don't
like, what do you mean
it.
you give me a 2 in
you know what? It's all quite harmless, and self-motivational if we're self-graders. But the minute we put that onto somebody else, that's like dynamite. That's civil war.
Right.
So under the roof of one household, I'm loving to get back. Here it is. You got it. We
so it was a document, philosophy. Okay.
What's the document that? So
it's a document that Watson did about Sherlock, because Sherlock knows that Watson documents all of.
But this is like an evaluation, right?
Huh?
This is like an evaluation, right? It's just like
Yeah, because this is almost as Watson being a student, an apprentice, and showing Sherlock later about what he thinks of him, how he analyzes him.
Yeah, I think the key is this happened at the early stage of their friendship.
Yeah,
So
on one of the occasions, the early days of our friendship, defined my limits in very precise fashion.
and that shows you the speed of Watson's acuity, because they'd known each other for a short time.
And also how like open they are, because I don't know if you would want to show that to like.
Yet still friends, yeah, or on top, yeah.
And so, what are the actual?
So it's interesting that it says philosophy, astronomy, and politics 0. Means he has no philosophy. What it doesn't mean that he doesn't have a philosophy of life, no morality.
I think his knowledge of the field of philosophy. So he hasn't
These are not things that
or Schopenhauer,
Right. He doesn't have a knowledge about philosophers and thoughts or schools of philosophy, or because they don't matter in his work,
And that's his frame. That's his focus.
Right. Astronomy doesn't matter either, and politics, because those he can go to his library, his Wikipedia, and find for that. And I think that's why
he probably wouldn't care anyway. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's why he brings up this, is because he's like, okay, you know what? I know this and this and that, but for this case, I don't know about politics, and this is about politics. So that's why we have to go and check.
And astronomy,
Wikipedia, right?
Interesting.
Interesting. I don't. Perhaps there's a Holmes novel or I'm sure that we will find stories that have a political element in future readings, and maybe it's a definite asset for Sherlock Holmes to be an ignorant in these things.
Right.
An asset. Ignorance is an asset in this regard.
Yeah, he would be a great one to.
Yeah, because probably many of his clients, he wouldn't have helped them if he had this political opinion, right? He will be like, "Why will I help you if you are, from this?"
Yeah, and instead he's apolitical or non-political. It's just
but he knows a little bit about geology, a lot about geology and botany, right? Variable botany. So I would rather know about botany and geology than about politics, because politics is
it's
pedestrian.
It's
human. It's messy. It's ever changing.
Yeah, I mean, being objective, there's not much to take from politics, but history and of course, some of the main philosophies of politics. But then you can't build anything from that.
Well, imagine Sherlock Holmes nowadays, and you ask him, "So, what do you think about Donald Trump?" He's like, "Whatever." What do you think about it? It's like, I don't know.
He will answer.
Probably read something
from business,
like unimaginable.
Yeah, he probably will say, "I don't know who's Donald Trump," because he wouldn't know much about it.
Right. But he can tell you about geology.
Right.
Yeah, and we see the really stand out here too is profound geology as regards mud stains from any region within 50 miles of town. I love that. And of course,
specificity, right?
You know what made me laugh so much about how him being a violin player, and this is where
he needed that, right? That's a wonderful detail.
Yeah, and it's really hilarious, but also disturbing.
Right?
How there's a moment that is a really delicate moment of the case. This guy may be killed. They have to find out. And he tells Watson, "You know what? Let's just play violin now."
Right. There's another case. I forget the name of the story, but it's one where they have like a kind of somebody's stealing stuff from a pawn shop, and in the middle of the story, he tells Watson, "Okay, we don't have anything to do now. let's go to a concert. And they go to a classical music concert, you know, for like a couple hours and eat well and stuff. And then he comes back to the case. So it's like.
But, you know, at the same time, I really think he's been so objective and so. Think of all the professionals and in no matter what career you do, and sometimes, you know, soccer players or, you know, scientists before a test or a project, what do they do? What do you tell them? They tell them, just go and relax, have a good time. What did Einstein do? He played the violin, you know.
But there's a little quality of like genius, almost bordering on like I don't know. What is it? Asperger? Why do you say that illness? Mental, you know.
Or perhaps autism. He has a level of autism.
Yeah, I mean, because he's somewhere there, he also talks about how he's not sociable at all, right? So it really makes me think that sometimes Sherlock, if it was in today, he would be a hacker, or he would
Something
be
like
a complete introvert that would be, you know,
he would be played by Keanu Reeves, like something like the main.
He would be in his computer and find out all the information and everything with his computer and do all the analysis there, and that's how he will find out, you know, about the cases.
What do you guys think he means by chemistry eccentric?
That's a. It sounds chemistry eccentric. I guess somebody who probably has unorthodox ideas, perhaps even concepts hatched by his own particular genius.
I think, if I'm not, that in some of the stories, I can't remember well, or maybe I'm mixing them up with the popular Hollywood movies, but I think that he tries making explosives and things like that with elements, you know, with chemistry. So
that's.
I took it like he has like deep knowledge in some areas and is completely ignorant in some other areas.
Right. Yeah, overall, it's that
chemistry knowledge.
Yeah, and it's a great way to really show more about a character in a funny way and just move on, you know.
Right.
Like insert there.
Anatomy and systematic.
Because now we know that he does all these things, you know, just in one paragraph.
I find that so suggestive. Anatomy unsystematic. I wonder, you know, if he has an aversion to certain parts of the body, or he knows all about bile ducts and arteries, but nothing about vaginas.
But if you think about it, we all have unsystematic knowledge of anatomy, you know.
Yeah, if we had a full-on godlike knowledge, it'd just be horrible. You couldn't live, you know. You'd be like Funes the Memorioso of your blood cells and molecules, and
that's exactly
hair follicles, and oh my God.
Well, funny you mentioned El Memorioso, because what is his demise is that he knows everything and he can't choose anything, right? He's an idiot. Because he can't be selective with his memory. Everything for him is important, you know, which is the opposite for Sherlock, which he knows
he's quite selective, right?
Important, you know. But at the same time, I think this paragraph, I like it. It's funny. But I do think that it styles the story, and it kind of, you know, it's too on your face.
I like it. It feels very contemporary. It gives me a lot of pleasure reading it, I have to say, personally.
Right. In my opinion, I would input and insert those traits throughout the story, you know, but not just.
It's not as kind of subtle, but even though it's not subtle, I think it's so. I mean, we're talking about it. You know what I mean?
Dialogue is the wonderful shorthand open to the written story.
I think the reason why, I mean, I like it. I think it's hilarious, but at the same time, my sometimes adversity with Sherlock, same with Edmundo Santos, of Count of Monte Cristo, is when you make it too much. You make him into a superhero, and then you stop believing that he's a human. You know, Rao, yeah, he can do anything, right?
Like it's not like that crazy of a description. You know what I mean? Like, okay, like let's look at it.
It's
You
playful.
read sensational literature, okay? In those crime records, plays the violin. He's a boxer, a swordsman, a lawyer.
Right, a lawyer. You know, so he's a lawyer, a swordsman. I mean, you know, it's like he can do anything, right?
No, but look, if I describe you guys, you know, like, and I gave you like, it would seem like fantastic to other people, you know, like I would just say Juan David Castilla, student of classical languages, you know, sportsman,
right.
You know what I mean? Like it's just to other people it seems, but to you it might be like, oh yeah, it's just normal, right?
Yeah, that's often the case. Undervaluing as people and artists, poor judges of what our treasures are, and I think it's quite lovely here. You know, imagine Watson too. How Watson might say these things himself. You know,
I would disagree with you, Juan.
I still think that it's.
I love your filmic.
When
you're wanting to keep the filmic pace up.
When it's.
I know, but as literature, it stands out.
When these traits, you know, abilities are gradually and dispersed, you know, they're mentioned, it makes it more human. But when it's just all like, oh, he's a swordsman and he's a lawyer, he's, you know, he's a Superman, you know.
No, but it doesn't say, because look, like he says, and this is like one of my favorite lines, and self-poisoner by cocaine.
Right.
Yeah, I think that one is.
Yeah. So like it's just flashing it all makes it a little bit sound, at least for me, less real. You know, how can you be like a drug addict at the same time, you know, being a
and a boxer, right? But you know, I mean, it's
that's when you got a good friend. Your best friend is a doctor, so hey,
he gets the prescriptions.
Right.
You know, but I think it kind of, okay, yeah, it is a little quote unquote, let's say stylized, right? Or fake, but it's not fake, it's stylized. But it lifts the story to the realm of the like.
If you read and if you see, especially the way they portray Sherlock in films, but also in the way Conan Doyle portrays Sherlock, and I love Sherlock all through his stories. There are moments where he comes as a superhero. You know, how can you go on you know, being like a swordsman and you beat up all these people and then you go and you solve a crime. I mean, it's amazing. It makes you a hero, you know. So I prefer the Sherlock when he's described as more human and more real, you know, which he does in many stories.
There's just incidentally a Billy Wilder movie that the creator, the director was never quite happy with, so that it exists and it might be interesting viewing. It is called The Secret Life of Sherlock Holmes, and a series of vignettes. I have not seen it, but it would be good homework for.
And you know, as a character in literature, it's like Sherlock Holmes,
right?
Count of Monte Cristo, Don Quixote, you know, who else? I mean, the Raskolnikov. You know, he's like full, like he's like its own thing. You know, and like Conan Doyle wanted to kill him.
The door now.
What's that?
I have to get somebody at the door here.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we're gonna probably bring it to an end soon because we really extended ourselves by.
And so yeah, anyway, but yeah, it's a good point. It's something to check more into it. you know.
Could we look at the end of when he finds out the bad news?
Yeah, can you bring us all there? I'm
Okay.
Okay, let me see. That's
just the incidental part about this is he another American trait that even then acronyms are used in the story. In the letter that Holmes sent to Savannah, Georgia, it was cheekily addressed capital SH to JO and Savannah, Georgia.
I love this paragraph too, guys. When he says,
oh yeah,
"Have you never heard of the KKK,
right.
Ku Klux
Yeah.
Klan?" I never have. You know, and then he goes and explains what the KKK is in, like, I don't know how historically accurate it might be. What's that?
It's a thumbnail. It's a very pithy, short.
You know, it's interesting because in my version, the font is smaller when it comes to that. You know, here in your document is the same font. You know, I think probably. You know,
oh, interesting. Do you have like
for readers, for people watching?
Here you see it's a smaller one.
Is that perhaps an more original edition of typography where it like he's reading out of the encyclopedia? Yeah, and
yeah. So they use the font.
Yeah.
That you will have from the. Is this Webster's? I think he mentions that. He says, where is this? He tells him to bring the somewhere he says somewhere he mentions the encyclopedia that this one comes from.
No, while Juan looks for it, I want to just kind of say that if people want to read the stories of Sherlock Holmes, they're all available on Gutenberg.org. So go check out Gutenberg, and you can find it there for free, and you can all read it. And so, you know, it's free.
Yeah, that looks like it's a great font, and it's open to all through the.
So then he solves the case. You know, we're gonna, if people want to read it, they can read that. But I want to look at the actual dialogue, right? So he goes to, okay, this is the
American Encyclopedia. So this is the, you know, I check, and this is the font from the American Encyclopedia, which, yeah, you know, which makes it, you know, for in an original book is very nice because it immerses you more. Like it's almost like if you went and you check in the encyclopedia about their, you know, their definition of the KKK. You know.
Oh, okay.
Very much.
Right. That's now I get what you're saying.
It was the encyclopedic age, and so in so many ways, the idea that you can put into a single book all this knowledge. You have Encyclopedia Americana, and of course the Britannica.
But you know, one thing. I mean, I love Gutenberg, you know, and you know, it's accessible for everybody. But sometimes getting, if possible, the original, like PDF or document of a story, I think it's also very important, you know, because here you have the bolds, you know, you have the original way that the story was written.
Yeah,
so can we see again the version that you have the book?
Oh yeah, this is the Reader's Digest.
Okay.
See, and you know, even has an illustration. We even have an illustration of Publisher.
Oh, I think I know who the illustrator is based on that.
Yeah. So it's.
Is it Dore, the illustrator?
I think his name is like Segan, something like that, who did the early illustrations that went with the books, and
right, and that kind of caught on with people, right?
Oh, Richard Levinson. We have there.
Okay, that's they look really vivid. That's for sure. These are
So
later.
exactly,
Yeah,
it's
I read them on my tablet, so we have different approaches to.
right. I think it's key, in my opinion. Sometimes, as writers and readers, how important is also space. How sometimes when I download so much from Gutenberg, but I think the key in Gutenberg also gives you the choice of
Right.
using the PDF, in that way keeping the original spacing, because spacing also creates intrigue and so many different aspects about reading.
Sounds
right?
like Carlos Williams, like really, you know what I'm talking about? The poet,
Yeah,
right?
because what do you mean?
He breaks down the lines into
Oh,
you probably
right,
William,
yeah.
William
I
Carlos
read him. Yeah.
right? So
I mean, an example is you in your some of your books or poems. You use sometimes like more space, or sometimes you make something segments more compact. Um,
it
I,
yeah.
I
I mean,
think
but to
it's
me the rhythm actually, yeah, it's true, but the space is created by the grammar also, like the pauses. And it's a combination. I think.
right. Yeah, more than anything. Yeah.
And
But
there's a little space here before the end,
uh,
you know, because he goes to bed, right? There's nothing more to be said or to be done tonight. So hand me over my violin and let us try to forget for half an hour the miserable weather and the still more miserable ways of our fellow men. That's like a little bit, how do you call it? When you hate everybody?
Little bit of misanthropic.
Yeah,
But
misanthropic leanings.
misanthropic is an attitude maybe just for people who clearly speak a natural and normal distrust of human beings. Let's the miserable ways. Well, we mean it's that natural. We're both social and antisocial in varying degrees. Anyway, miserable is a little putting a cherry on top of it, but yeah, sure.
Well, and then they go to bed, right? They go to bed, and then the next day, Sherlock was already at breakfast when I came down. Uh,
right.
and then he goes out the whole day, right, to figure out the thing by himself, doesn't he?
He does.
Right.
Like,
Then
he comes back and he hasn't had any food.
right. Let's see if we can. He searched the Dundee records and he figures it out, and we're gonna let our readers we
Yeah.
don't want to give away the whole wrap up. So
Only, yeah. Maybe one more detail that it just made me laugh so much. In a way, by Sherlock sending the captain the seats. You just imagine this captain figuring out who on earth who on earth found out about this? How did he get these seats, right? And he's brilliant because it's his revenge.
And what do the seats mean?
Yeah, well, he knows. It's almost like, the captain knows about the seats because he's the one sending them. But now somebody sends the seat to him, so it means that somebody is going to kill him, and so his way of revenge with this captain that killed everybody was that now he's going to be paranoid.
He wants to terrorize the terrorists.
That it says it may give him a sleepless night. He will find it as a sure as a precursor of his fate, as Openshaw did before him.
There's a really dark side to Sherlock Holmes.
So that's his revenge, right? Like, okay, now you terrorize this poor man. Now this will haunt you.
Would you mind if we go back to what you were saying about those key moments of dialogue? Because it is here when he finds out that young Openshaw is dead, and he says, "You will excuse me for not waiting for you. I foresee a very busy day before me looking in this case of young Openshaw." And then Watson goes to get the newspaper right before he leaves. As I waited, I lifted the unopened newspaper from the table and glanced my eye over it. I rested upon the heading which sent a chill to my heart. "Holmes," I cried, "you are too late." When do you ever hear that, right? He said, laying down his cup, "I feared as much. How was it done?" He spoke calmly. but I could see that he was deeply moved.
Yeah, and this is, where I was also in that part where she's moved, and later, after the newspaper report talks about how he says in the, that he should come for me for help, and that I should send him away to his death. He sprang from his chair and paced about the room in uncontrollable agitation, with a flush upon his sallow cheeks and a nervous clasping of his long, thin hands. So I mean, his pride is hurt, but he's also very disturbed about having this man now.
You know what saves him from it is when he says, like, my pride is hurt, and he says he acknowledges it. It is a petty feeling, no doubt, but it hurts my pride. So by him calling it petty, is like he shows that he's not like a sociopath. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, well, maybe, I mean, we know that he's not, but like by saying that he cushions the harshness of the thing.
Almost
whole passages leading into it. It starts with the almost bloodless awe, like your eggs were overcooked almost. He goes from that to actually something, a deep emotional acknowledgement.
I see it almost like
that's the conclusion. He should come to me for help, and that I should send him away for his death. It's taking
guilt
for that which he ought not have full responsibility for.
The way I took it is more like he's deeply hurt, disturbed by this death. He's showing, he's trembling, he's going everywhere, but he wants to show Watson that he's not soft. So he's like, it hurt my pride, right? I'm gonna fix this. But
he's good at playing that.
He doesn't want to show.
I find what you said earlier like so insightful, that he advises Openshaw not to attempt revenge, but he falls into it, and
right.
It goes to the idea that revenge, the need for revenge, is such a human emotion or drive,
We need it, yeah.
That even somebody who's in total charge of his emotions can fall, I don't want to say victim, but fall in its sway,
And you're right here that here we have this man that he's, Sherlock, but I think this is one of the few stories where they show Sherlock vulnerable, right? They're completely losing. He talks about also how he's only failed about 2 or 3 cases, two men and 1 to a woman. But here he lost, right? And he's hurt. He got somebody killed. He got,
Well, I mean, that's the question, right? Does he win or does he lose? Because at the end of the day, I mean,
he loses because he loses his composure, right? He ends up committing revenge by sending the letter and the pips to the captain, and by losing his temper, he
doesn't even want the police involved. He says like, they must be cunning devils, and then later on he says, Watson tells him, to the police, no, I shall be my own police.
I'll take my own revenge.
Look at the beauty of this line. When I have spun the web, they may take the flies, but not before. It's like such a superhero thing, well framed.
It's really patent there. Him going out on rogue police.
It's going rogue, right?
It really is going rogue. And maybe it's fair to mention at this time to ourselves and the reader, who will absolutely be rewarded by reading the 5 Orange Pits. And believe me, after all our multiple layered viewing of this tale, it's really just a delicious, a truffle of a story. And those of us who have been along for this literary conversation about it. You will be able to see match wits with us, and and certainly it's imbued with pleasure. It's a story that we've come up with something inexhaustible, and I feel like it has a hole in it, kind of like the nothingness, which seems to be pervade our universe and our physical bodies, even, I'm told, and we have to fill it in with our own, just our own feeling about what is at stake is this story, and the psychic health of Sherlock Holmes, and is he a superhero? Is he a broken human being who
is he successful in this case? Is he not successful?
Yeah, I definitely take this one. It's a sad one. It's a sad one.
So, Graydon, I want you to do us the honor of reading the last paragraph of the story, because I think it touches upon the thing that you've been saying, on the whole length of our conversation here, and that is the touch of what I call the divine providence, but it could be something else, just good luck or bad luck for the 5 orange pip senders. So, and would you mind reading this last paragraph? There's ever a flaw.
Happy to. There is ever a flaw, however, in the best laid of human plans, and the murderers of John Openshaw were never to receive the orange pips, which would show them that another as cunning and as resolute as themselves was upon their track. Very long and very severe were the equinoctial gales that year. We waited long for the news of the Lone Star of Savannah, but none ever reached us. We did hear at last that somewhere far out in the Atlantic, the shattered stern post of a boat was seen swinging in the trough of a wave with the letters LS carved upon it. And that is all which we shall ever know of the fate of the Lone Star.
All right. Such a cool ending with the weather, Ray. Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, that is a coda. That is a coda to, honestly, I feel like I would like to read today's story all over again.
Right, except not today.
let it breathe for a couple of days.
Right.
Yeah.
I see a little bit of Sherlockian-like focus in you, Graydon.
Wow.
Hey, I'll admit that, surely.
Yeah, well, anybody who writes novels, as you guys know, it has to be extremely focused.
All of us have Sherlockian, the good and the bad,
Good and the bad, yeah.
Yeah.
One last thing that I do want to say about it is how cool this is. There's a flaw, however, in the best laid out human plans. So even no matter how well you plan things, they're human, so they have flaws. But in this case, the flaw turns out to be his salvation, or the help. Like his plan didn't turn out well.
Yeah.
But actually, nature gave him a hand.
It saved the justice, the forced justice, the arbitrary hand of Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah, because it would have been kind of ugly if he had sent the pips and the other people would have been kind of terrorized, or even if they're criminals. You know what I mean? For him to do that, because it's just revenge.
Yeah, death sentence somebody. But this is really one of the cases where, with or without Sherlock, it was going to happen. There was a fate. There was at the end of the last 6 words of the story are the fate of the Lone Star. There was a fate for it. They were meant, all these characters, they were going to die with the best life of human plans or without it. It was just going to happen. There was it is a moral story, no matter whatever you do, some things are just going to happen, And these guys, the bullets had their names, period.
That's it. And you know, it's interesting how he mentions Savannah, Georgia, because it makes it sound so exotic, like I had said. Because we're based in London in the story, and then suddenly it's like the American South, like a port in the American East, Southeast, you know. So all that evokes, evocation of Savannah, Georgia, where I've been there, and it's a wonderful city. But you know, imagine how it must have been in the 19th century.
So exotic, and there's really this fascination by some of the writers at that time with America, right? With this exotic America more than anything. You know, that now is changed. Now you don't see a writer fascinated in as much in Florida for being exotic as more
by exotic I mean like from the British perception, you know what I mean?
Right, exactly.
So well, I don't know, I'm glad we made it to the end of the story, even though it's like almost 3 hours later, but you know.
As you say, there's I'm not going to read the story today because it's already tomorrow.
Right.
Wow. Yeah.
There you go. So, but you know, it would be nice to reread it, having taken all of your insights, and yeah. So we'll do it again. You know, we shall meet again, and maybe do you think we should do another Sherlock Holmes, or shall we jump to the next? I guess we will.
We got The Lost World coming up. A story. The title that pops in my head is the Red-Headed League. I know that got my attention from a child.
I want to propose, we'll talk about it, but we can do one more Sherlock Holmes story, and then we'll move on to the next, either next author, whether it be Garcia Marquez or, you know, whoever we want to talk about. And we might do one of the next, when we read a Spanish story, we'll do it in Spanish. Why not?
Oh, that'll, excellent. Very good.
I am very Sherlockian in that sense that I wouldn't mind, but that's my opinion. I know I wouldn't mind doing the whole Sherlock stories, like all the, you know, the whole book.
Do like
and then moving to like a different writer, you know, but really focusing on one writer and getting all the patterns and making difference in between in different stories. I think it's beautiful to really get to dissect, you know, just the writing. Yeah.
Okay, so let's do one more, and then we'll see if we still have it in us to keep doing Sherlock.
But like I said, that's crazy me, you know. But yeah.
No, I think it's a good idea.
Very well. On that note, I contemplate a pleasant voyage with more Conan Doyle and Sherlock, or perhaps another shipmate.
Exactly. And so I just want to say, we're going to put all the links to our work at the end of the at the bottom of our YouTube video with Graydon Miller, who's a wonderful author of the Spanish novel Mujeres con Navajas, okay, and other books, Havana Brotherhood and Juan David Castilla, with links to his wonderful projects with in terms of film, okay, Cinema Union or Union Cinema.
Union, yeah.
Right. And also we'll put some of links to my essays and books of poems and other stuff. So, you know, hopefully you can come with us into this voyage into literature.
Right here, we got 80 miles per hour.
Yeah.
Why? I guess I was, my room order, my direction has been changed. I'm looking at this in reverse today. But you're seeing
so
it.
It would be 8 miles per hour.
Yeah. I'll do there.
It doesn't matter whether it's 8, we'll still get there.
There you go.
Very cool.
Conversations with Literature, 80 miles per hour.
Everybody has to read 80 miles per hour. Yeah.
Thank you. And
a beautiful piece of work.
Thank you, folks. We'll do it again very soon. Yeah.
Looking forward very much.
At least expect a video once a week, and we're going to dive into literature all the way.
All the way. That's the way to go. There's no other way around.
Bravo, everybody. Thank you.
Guys.
Thank you. Take care. Goodbye.
Bye.